My name is Natalie. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, I thought family was supposed to mean unconditional support. But that belief shattered on a cold, rain-slick evening when I found myself alone, broken, and dialing the one number I thought would never fail me. The accident happened on Route 61, just outside the town where I grew up. It wasn't even my fault. A truck swerved across the yellow lines, forcing me into a ditch. The airbags went off, smoke hissed from the hood, and I felt a hot sting spread down my leg where glass had cut through my jeans. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my phone, the rain pounding against the windshield. Called my parents. My mother picked up after the third ring. "Mom," I choked, my voice raw with fear. "I've been in an accident. My car's wrecked. I need help." There was silence on the line, the kind of silence that drags and makes your chest tighten. Then her voice came, sharp and impatient. "Natalie, you're 34. You've made your own choices. You can figure this out yourself." I froze, pressing the phone harder against my ear like I had misheard her. "What? Mom, I'm bleeding. I'm stranded. I just need a ride or someone to come." She cut me off. "Your father and I are tired, Natalie. We're not in the business of rescuing you anymore. You always find a way to get into trouble, and honestly, we've done enough. Pull a tow. Call a friend. We're not coming." Her words sliced deeper than the glass embedded in my leg. My own mother. My father in the background, not even speaking. Two people who had raised me, who I thought loved me, who had taught me that family comes first, hanging me out to dry when I needed them most. The call ended with a click. I sat there, numb, my phone slipping from my hands onto the seat beside me. The rain beat against the cracked windshield, the car hissing like it was mocking me. I dialed 3 other numbers before anyone picked up, an old college friend who lived 40 minutes away. She came, wrapped my arm, and stayed with me until a tow truck arrived. A stranger gave me more comfort than my own parents. That night, as I limped into my apartment with bandages and bruises, something inside me hardened. Their refusal wasn't just neglect, it was betrayal. I wasn't a child crying for attention. I was their daughter, stranded and injured, and they had chosen their comfort over my safety. I replayed my mother's voice in my head. "We're not in the business of rescuing you anymore." That was the night everything changed. That was the night I decided if they didn't care about my survival, then maybe it was time I stopped caring about theirs. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that the support system they leaned on, the church group, the neighbors, the very community they bragged about, all of that had threads I could pull. And one day soon I would. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. Growing up, I used to think my parents were the type of people others envied. To outsiders, they seemed like the picture of responsibility and respectability. My father, Charles Hughes, was a deacon at the local church, always shaking hands, offering blessings, speaking about faith and family values. My mother, Eleanor, carried herself like the town matriarch, hosting Bible studies in our living room and dropping off casseroles for neighbors when someone fell sick. But behind the closed doors of our neat little house, the cracks were always there. I learned early that love from my parents was conditional. As long as I performed, as long as I got the grades, played the part of the obedient daughter, and kept their reputation spotless, I was praised. "That's my girl," Dad would say after a good report card. "You're making us proud," Mom would beam when I played piano at church functions. But when I stumbled, when I came home with a B instead of an A, when I forgot to practice my recital piece, when I dared to show sadness or frustration, their approval vanished. My mistakes were treated as moral failings, evidence that I wasn't disciplined enough, grateful enough, good enough. The first time I really saw their priorities was when I was 18. I'd been rear-ended on my way home from school. The car wasn't badly damaged, but I was shaken. My hands were trembling as I walked into the house and told them what had happened. My father didn't ask if I was hurt. He didn't hug me, didn't even look me over. His first words were, "Do you realize what this will do to our insurance premiums?" My mother scolded me for being careless, even though the accident wasn't my fault. I remember sitting at the dinner table that night, pushing peas around my plate, realizing I could have been seriously hurt, and they would still have found a way to make it my fault. That moment stayed with me. It was the seed of something bitter. Through college, the same pattern repeated. If I achieved something, they showed up, smiling for pictures, taking credit. When I struggled, when I failed an exam, when I broke up with a boyfriend, they distanced themselves. Mom once said, "We can't carry your burdens forever, Natalie. You need to learn to stand on your own." I thought maybe adulthood would change things. That once I had a career and a home of my own, maybe they would finally treat me like a human being and not just a reflection of their pride. But adulthood only made the cracks more obvious. They weren't parents who wanted to support. They were parents who wanted to be supported. When their roof leaked, they called me. When Dad's bad back made it hard for him to mow the lawn, I came over. When Mom wanted a new recliner, I dipped into my savings. I gave and gave because I wanted their love, their approval, the kind of relationship I saw my friends having with their parents. And yet, when I needed them, when I was drowning after losing my job last year, when the bills piled up, when I admitted to Mom that I felt like a failure, they brushed me off. "Everyone struggles, Natalie. You'll figure it out," she said, waving me away like I was a child asking for candy instead of a 34-year-old woman begging for comfort. The car accident was the climax, but it wasn't the beginning. It was just the day the mask slipped completely, and I realized what I had been refusing to see for decades. To them, I was never really their daughter. I was an extension of their image, a tool, a resource they could use or discard depending on the season. And as I sat there replaying years of neglect, I started connecting the dots to something else. They weren't just careless parents. They were deeply dependent on the community around them. They leaned on the church for meals when Mom had surgery. They leaned on neighbors for rides when Dad's truck broke down. They leaned on every network possible to make their lives easier. They had turned their backs on me. But what they didn't realize was that I held something more valuable than their approval. I held their secrets, their patterns, the weak threads holding up the reputation they worshipped. And I was ready to start tugging. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The days after the accident felt like I was moving through fog. My bruises faded, but the sting of what my parents had done only grew sharper with time. Every time I replayed my mother's words, "You're on your own," I felt something inside me shift. I had spent my entire life bending for them, covering their mistakes, doing favors for their friends, helping Dad with community fundraisers, helping Mom host her church luncheons, pretending our family was solid when in reality, I was always the disposable one. Now, as I sat on my couch staring at the bills piling up on the coffee table, something clicked. If they didn't want to be my safety net, then fine. But I knew their safety net better than anyone. I had built it with them. I knew the names, the phone numbers, the favors owed. And I also knew how fragile those connections really were. Their entire sense of security rested on a web of people. Neighbors, colleagues, old church members, Dad's golf buddies. People they leaned on whenever life got hard. People who trusted them because of the image they projected. And I knew just how to unravel it. The first step was quiet, subtle. I reached out to the folks I'd spent years helping on my parents' behalf. I didn't trash talk. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just told the truth. I told Mrs. Hampton, the sweet widow who relied on my dad to mow her lawn, what had happened the night of my accident. How they left me stranded, bruised, and scared. Her gasp on the phone was all the confirmation I needed. "Natalie, I had no idea. They've always acted like such pillars of the community." Exactly. Pillars with cracks running deep inside. Then there was Mr. Lyle, Dad's golf buddy, who often praised him for being such a family man. I casually mentioned how grateful I was for the ride home I got from a stranger after my parents refused to come. The silence on the other end told me everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped. "That doesn't sound like the man I thought I knew." Piece by piece, the facade began to crumble. But revenge wasn't just about exposing them, it was about strategy. I started attending the very community events they used to drag me to. At first, people looked surprised to see me without them. I smiled, carried myself with quiet confidence, and let my story slip out only when asked. "Oh, your parents. They couldn't make it. Things have been strained since my accident. You know, when they left me at the hospital to figure it out alone." The whispers spread faster than wildfire. Mom called me one night, her voice sharp. "Natalie, people are asking questions. What have you been saying?" I let her stew for a moment before answering calmly. "Only the truth, Mom. Isn't that what you always told me to do?" Her silence was delicious. Behind the scenes, I was careful. I didn't blow everything up at once. I let it simmer. A seed of doubt here, a quiet revelation there. Enough for people to start questioning the image my parents had built over decades. I knew their weak spots too well. Dad depended on his network for business referrals. Mom depended on her circle for status and validation. Without those people, they were nothing more than an aging couple in a crumbling house of cards. And as I sat at my desk one evening, jotting names on a notepad, I realized just how much power I had. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one stranded. They were. And they didn't even know it yet. Real quick, subscribe and share your thoughts below before we get to the part that still makes my heart race. The unraveling didn't happen in one dramatic explosion. No, it came like a slow leak in a tire. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore once the car started swerving. I watched it all from a distance. It began with Dad losing a client he had counted on for years. Mr. Lyle, his golf buddy, stopped calling him for weekend games. When Dad showed up at the course one Saturday, he wasn't on the guest list. He called me afterward, his voice tight with forced calm. "Strange mix-up. I'm sure it's nothing." But I knew better. Then it was Mom. She showed up at her church luncheon expecting her usual spot at the head table, only to find someone else had taken it. Whispers followed her as she sat down further back. A friend of hers told me later, "People are saying things about how she treated you after your accident. Some are disappointed." Piece by piece, their world was shrinking. And I didn't need to shout or make a scene. The truth did the work for me. I saw it most clearly the night of the community fundraiser. For years, my parents had been the stars of that event. They worked the room, smiling, laughing, shaking hands. People used to flock to their table. But that year I went alone. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, a scar still faintly visible on my wrist from the accident. People noticed me. They came up, asked how I was doing, offered their support. And when someone asked if my parents were coming, I just smiled. I'm not sure. They didn't exactly show up for me when I needed them most. The room shifted. Eyes darted toward the door as if waiting for my parents to appear. But when they finally walked in, the applause that used to follow them was gone. The energy was different. People nodded politely, but no one rushed over. For the first time I saw uncertainty in their eyes. Later that night, Dad tried to corner me near the exit. His jaw was clenched, his voice low. "You're poisoning people against us." I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "No, Dad. I just told the truth. If the truth poisons you, maybe you should ask why." He had no answer. The final blow came weeks later. One of Mom's closest friends, a woman she leaned on for everything from social events to advice, quietly cut her off. I knew because Mom called me in tears, the same woman who once told me I was on my own. "Natalie, I don't understand why this is happening. Everyone is pulling away from us. It feels like we're Alone. I let her words hang there, the silence heavy. Then I spoke soft but firm. Now you know how it feels. She didn't respond. In that moment I didn't feel cruel. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt free. For years, I'd been shackled to the idea that family meant sacrifice without return. That I owed them my loyalty, even when they left me bleeding on the side of the road. But not anymore. They had built their lives on the illusion of community, of support. I had simply pulled back the curtain and shown the truth. And once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. The parents who left their daughter stranded after an accident were now stranded themselves. And me. I walked away with my head high, no longer the girl begging for their approval. I had found my own strength, my own voice. And I knew they'd never forget the night they realized the daughter they abandoned was the very one who dismantled the world they thought would always protect them. You know, betrayal has a way of sharpening the soul. That night on the road broke me, but it also remade me. My parents thought I was helpless, that I'd keep running back no matter how coldly they treated me. Instead, I took away the one thing they relied on most, their precious support network, and showed them just how lonely it feels to be abandoned. Family may turn their back on you, but sometimes, that's the fire that makes you rise stronger. And if my story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.